All right, so we'll give people a couple of minutes to join. I started the recording again, and we'll just wait till we hit quorum. All right, everyone look at the agenda and let me know if you want anything added to the agenda. And we don't have to do these in this order, depending on who's available. But these are the topics I thought would be useful to cover, and in particular the first three, and then a couple of quick updates. I see that number 7 was actually added by somebody.
Yeah, it's me, Sridhar.
Okay. All right. I think we can get started. We've got 6 of 9, which I believe gives us the minimum for quorum. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct.
So we have 6 of 9. So we will go ahead and get started. All right. Let's start with the easy one first. So lab update. So Venkat posted this in Slack, and so I copied it here for every. Yeah, go ahead, Venkat.
Yeah, so we met. You see the names here, and then we found there is a vendor who is like an order of magnitude different or cheaper than any of these. So we thought that the gap is too wide, and it's important to investigate that. Keith found this vendor, also located fairly close to all the member companies of OPI. So that's the reason for us to move the whole discussion by one more week to investigate and get a quote from them also. So we have sent them a message and still waiting for a reply. If in case they don't come up, then we will be meeting today or tomorrow to close on that. And like I mentioned last time, because some of these numbers are confidential, we're not discussing the numbers here. But I think, as somebody suggested, we'll definitely present some of it to the board when we meet. But the plan is to close it, not to kind of. Most likely, we don't have to postpone. We'll be able to close it today or tomorrow, and I find the time from all the members there.
Okay, great. Who's the new vendor?
It's called Hurricane Electric. HE.
Oh, I know who. Yeah, I know who they are. I didn't realize they did lab hosting. Okay.
Yeah. So I can say maybe at a high level, right? It's a co-location kind of offering that they have, but they have smart hands built into it. We can even add something more on top and saying, okay, in addition, we need these extra services. Still, it comes like an order of magnitude lower. So we all felt, right? If you see the list, these are all from different companies.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a community money. It's not our own money. When the pricing is so different, we felt that we have to do the little extra due diligence to kind of go after and find out why it is so different, and then do some work there before we make a call on the existing 4 vendors. So that's what we decided.
Okay. Any questions or comments? I think that was a good update. All right. Yep. I think that's proceeding well. The next one is a future agenda item. I want to just explain for that one. What I want is a status and current plans executive summary for each of the 4 working groups in this forum next week. So I want to use next week's call to have a general status sync up, and I will send a note to the 4 working group chairs to ask explicitly for that. I don't know, is there any question or comment on that? All right, cool. Yeah, we haven't had one in a while, so that's why that one. The next one that's easy is Mark isn't on, so I'm going to ask him for when we can review the networking model and approaches in the TSC. So when can we have something in the TSC that we can see what the proposals are for the networking models? So that's what number 6 is about, and I'll take a note here.
Has the networking model been approved by the API subgroup?
Well, it hasn't, which is why I'm not asking him to present it today, Dan. It's exactly right. So I'm going to ask him what's the time schedule for proposing one or more networking model approaches. So maybe it's a week, maybe it's a month, maybe it's a year, but I want to get I want to get a kind of a formal update, and maybe that can be done as part of the 10-minute summary next week. So yeah, I don't think there is one, which is why I'm asking the question. Actually, I know there's not one completely agreed, which is why I'm asking. Okay, demo. Okay, let's do another easy one. The feedback from the TSC on website maintenance, WordPress done by Linux Foundation versus members Hugo. Sridhar, you want input from the TSC in what way? Because this seems, well, okay, yeah. In what way do you want TSC input?
I mean, either what is TSC's opinion, whether to stick with the Hugo existing or to move to WordPress. And I have put the both pros and cons for both of them in that link. I think we have just an information to the TSC. So we from last week we have a new marketing representative for OPI. Her name is May, and she gave this presentation, and she has put this differences also, comparing those two. Slide number 6, I think. Yeah. So comparing these two, and even in the marketing committee, they want TSC's opinion first. What does TSC believe? Which one should go? If maybe we can do a kind of what do the members believe? Do we stick with Hugo or do we move to WordPress kind of thing? Because this has been, they want to make a decision on this and try to improve on it.
I'll jump in. So I'm not sure why it cannot be a hybrid. It's a while since I did some of this stuff, but I had a, when I was looking at it last time, there is a nicer and a beautiful website, but some of the content is pulled from something that you can do like a check-in kind of workflow, GitHub kind of workflow, because in a page you can redirect and you can say, hey, instead of this page, go load something else. There are certain redirections, unless they've become a no-no for whatever security or other reasons. Can these become combined? That means the main website itself looks nice. It's a nice WordPress website. It doesn't change, but certain content, let's say, that changes regularly, gets checked in, and then that get pulled into specific pages. And if there is a bigger change, then yeah, you have to go and change it in the WordPress.
Stephen?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just throw out my thought here, and that is, as long as we can get, an appropriate SLA, I'd say let's just move to WordPress. I know there were some people that were uncomfortable with giving up the direct control. I personally would rather give it a try, see how it works, and then make, if we need to make an adjustment, we can adjust backwards. But I have no particular, tie to Hugo. So I would love to see some people who, know how to make a, good-looking web page, make a good-looking web page for us.
Right. It's good points. Anyone else? Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely agnostic as to the approach here, but it strikes me as us, we don't really have a resource anymore to do the Hugo work. And if we go with the WordPress, effectively we get the resource through Linux Foundation. So to me, it's a no-brainer. You go with the path where you have the people to do the work.
Yeah.
So I also am aligned with going to WordPress, since we can actually get work done and maintenance will happen, right? And we don't have anyone to stand up for Hugo right now. So I think we have to move away from it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'll make a devil's advocate argument for Hugo. Although my gut tells me that switching to WordPress, where we don't have to do the website maintenance ourselves from the technical team on OPI, makes more sense. So the devil's advocate position is that we are able to publish content as it changes in a well understood pull request approval build to publish workflow. And that gives us full control over what and when content gets exposed. It means we're never out of date. Now, I believe we can get an equivalent thing with WordPress from reading this. We just have to change the workflow, change the way we interact. And if there were a way to do hybrid where markdown files were cross-linked from WordPress, so the WordPress pointed at a markdown file that it pulled up and showed, and we had a set of markdown files that we flagged as the public versions of things, then we could easily, using GitHub, move content into those pages, publish them, and then just notify, hey, you just need to, pull the markdown file again and regenerate the web page, which should be like 2 button pushes or something. Should be all automated on the WordPress side, or at least I would hope it was. So I'm inclined as well for WordPress. All right. Why don't we do this? I'm gonna take a note for us to vote on this next week. So go think about. I think I know where the sentiment is right now, but I want to give people a week to think about this, and we'll make a final decision next week, one way or the other, no matter what. And
Joel,
go ahead.
yeah,
Sure.
sorry to interrupt. I just
Right.
thought, could you just simply get an SLA from WordPress on time it takes to effect a change and just
Sridhar?
get that data?
Yeah, Sridhar.
Sure. So for any minor change, as I mentioned in the last point, any minor changes, our representative can itself do quickly, and we can also provide access to any members who would want it. And thirdly, for the major changes, typically, depending, they say like how many pages, new pages to be created, it may be like 2 to 3 days to a week for the major changes.
Yeah, so our biggest thing is updating content on for an existing page. In other words, we change the description of boot. We change the description of API by adding, additional pieces to it, right?
Those things, we can only do it quickly right away. We will have the access, both me and May will have the access. And even as a member, we can provide those access to other members also, of course. So we can also ourselves do it quickly. We don't have to go to open a ticket and do the LF follow for those kind of changes, any minor content changes. But if there is a big design change and create a new page and all those things, then we can go through them, but they will take like, depending on the change, anywhere between 3 days to a week.
All right.
Like textual contents and all those things, even we can change it our own right away in a few minutes. We can do it. That's pretty quick and easy.
Right.
From TSC side, I can handle those changes. From marketing side, she will handle those changes, and we can do all the minor changes quickly right away. And in the same content, maybe if any member has any preference over, if we decide to WordPress, if there is any example site that you like, you can add it, you can suggest to me or to the marketing committee over email. It's in the slide number 7. There's some samples they have shared that suit our project. In the slide number 7, yeah, some examples, colorful, the dark, the clean, these kind of examples they have provided that can suit OPI. If anything, you can also suggest.
All right. Well, let's agree that we're going to move to WordPress, and then we can
Correct, yeah. Then we can come back.
Somebody who knows a little bit about this, pick the style and so on, or maybe the outreach group should do that, since that's public facing. Okay, so I get the current sentiment. Good discussion. We'll have very short discussion next time, and then we'll vote.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So that's that one. The demo tutorials walk. Text broke the wrong way. Oh, yeah, that's because I can't spell. Okay. Walkthroughs. I didn't want a lot of discussion on this. So I didn't want a lot of walkthrough on this, or a lot of discussion on this. It's just, you know, having demos is great. You know, tutorials is great, but how do we publish them? Is there a better way we can advertise and publish them other than just a bunch of speaking engagements? Can we use that to get people engaged? That was this topic, and maybe there's not a lot of discussion here. I just wanted to put it in your heads to think about how we can do that more effectively. Venkat?
Yeah, so yeah, they can just go onto our website, and we cite the website everywhere, and the links can be in any of the YouTube and other you know, places where we post the videos, right? So the key though is to have, I mean, how do people try this? Early on, we were discussing about behavioral models that we will have. So it's all software based simulation where we could try these, and then off late, I think we are not. I mean, I know we still haven't decided on the networking model, but hopefully, when we do that, like other projects, like for example, Dash, if we can auto-generate the behavioral models, and then these demos, tutorials become easy for people to try. Otherwise, they need the labs, they need all the DPUs and things like that. So I think there's some more discussion to have offline, and then maybe come back. Otherwise, we have demos right now. To get to tutorials, we need either our lab to be accessible to others, or we need a behavioral model. So this may be something we could discuss in some one of the working groups and bring it back.
Okay. Yeah, again, so Stephen, so I've got Keith, go ahead, and then Stephen, I want your thoughts on this since it's in your working group.
Okay, hello.
Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, is engagement measured? If it's measured, for example, number of views on your website, then you can think about investing in search engine optimization, right? To see if you can improve the engagement metric.
It's good. Yeah, that's a good call out. Yeah, again, if we get Linux Foundation with WordPress, that will help. And if the website linked to the demos, say, you know, if you want to try this, here's a demo, or you know, have a script or a screen capture that shows exactly, you know, exactly working with text in between. Those kind of things would be useful. Although again, it's going to take volunteers from member companies to produce that content. All right. All right. Anyway, this will kind of be an ongoing discussion, but just think about if you have positive suggestions. Stephen, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so just quickly on Keith's point, I mean, on the one hand, we've got things that are, you know, recorded and published on YouTube, and we can see the number of views there. So that's you know, a metric that we can have available to us. Another metric is, you know, if we have code, is that stuff is in GitHub repos, and we can look for things like stars, forks, stuff like that. Not a perfect metric, but you know, maybe for actual engagement, it's actually a little bit of a better metric than even views. So just something to think about.
Right.
And yes, I do think that it makes. I think we're going down the right path, right? So we've got you know, Paul setting up the demos playlist in YouTube. I think that's good, and I think we do need a good, you know, place for the code to live. I'm perfectly fine with some of these things starting their life in the POC repo. And then if they outgrow that because, you know, they've become, you know, bigger than just a simple POC, they can always graduate to their own repo, which is kind of the model that we've been following to this point. And I think that works out okay. You know, I'd love to hear if there's opinions on a better way to do that.
Right. And so for that, they should bring it into Slack and the working group, the POC working group meetings, and then we'll, if we have final proposals, we can bring them in here, or general discussion needed, bring it in here. KYS?
Yes, so I was wondering who the audience is that we expect would be looking at these demos and evaluating, the choices we have made. Certainly we should do all that's being discussed here. I was also wondering if we could plan on some focused outreach to entities that for whatever reason are not currently paying members of this foundation project, right? So I don't know if Google is here or AWS is here. Certainly I know that Microsoft, while I'm here, we haven't made a decision to really become project members at some level in the next foundation. So I'm super interested in becoming one, right? So I'm trying to sell that idea internally at Microsoft. So I was wondering if we could do some focused outreach to some of these potential users at scale of what we are trying to put together here.
Right, sure. Yeah, that good, all good points, KYS. I think our target audience is tier 2 clouds, telco, large enterprise, integrators, anybody who would want to use DPUs, government labs, DOE. I mean, those are the people who tend to join our presentations, and we have some participation from some of those guys in the OPI meetings themselves, but they're kind of waiting for a consistent picture to emerge, which just takes a little time because these things are complex, before they commit heavily. And a number of them want to commit, but they're just waiting. Everyone's playing wait to see, especially this year, given macroeconomic and other things.
So Joseph, I want to add one other scenario to what you just described there, right? Heavy edge scenarios that all of the hypercloud vendors are also going after. Microsoft certainly is going after that scenario as well. And there, I think there is almost immediate, applicability of the work done by this project.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, all of the so big retail is another one. So again, I agree. Edge is a great use case. Again, we've gone through all the use cases, and again, we can go through that a little bit again next week and argue about the relative importance of the use cases or discuss that. So Vin, but your points are well taken, KWS. Excellent. VinCat?
Yeah, I think use case work group is where this is being discussed, right? It's not only about use cases, but going and talking to the relevant people and companies. And then sometimes it's not just this group, right? Each of us have our own customers. The idea was, folks from there would go to their own customers and start talking about, these kinds of things.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, another good point. Okay, so keep thinking about if there's ways to improve how we get the word out. If we can do something beyond, demos where we walk people through, write a little script or write a little how-to, so somebody can read that and go, I get it, and I get why this is valuable. We have a lot of good work, a lot of good thinking. We can create releases for our various components. We have fairly good technical descriptions in a number of areas, not complete coverage, but I think one of the things we're missing is maybe some tutorial / walkthrough stuff. And the audience for this will, increase massively over the next 2 years. But again, this is a relatively new area. There have been some DPU-like things in the market for a little while, but it isn't like there's a long history, and this is, these are used pervasively everywhere, other than in the big clouds who do it for themselves, and even not all of them. So Okay, so now let's go to let's spend the rest of the time on topics 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we've had discussion in the working groups on Ericsson Intel K8's networking use case, the F5 proposal for NGINX distributed firewall, and then the scope of DPU boot. 1 and 2 were sort of similar kinds of discussions. Number 3 is, do we go broad, or do we and try to cover, you know, the full spectrum of boot and host and PCI interaction and BMC interaction at once, or do we pick only one more narrow subset, finish that completely, and then pick up another one? That was and then on the NGINX and the K8's networking case, the question is, do we want to, you know, the questions that came up were, do we want to embrace those as a project, you know, essentially little mini projects, and see where, it's not just see where it takes us, right? Because we know that those are useful collections of software that do something people would care about. And the discussion was, A, we're going to learn a bunch and learn if we have what holes we have, and then we can fill in those holes. B, we'll have something we can show that somebody could usefully use, you know, or base what they're doing on that and say, oh, that's how we use the APIs to do that thing. Okay, now I know how to do that thing, right? And again, we're not implying any support. We're not selling it to anyone. We're not a product, but it points the way to why the APIs are valuable to my mind. So let's discuss 1 and 2 first. I think both of these are worth pursuing. We pretty much agree that the NGINX we will do. Is that your understanding? I guess Tim as well.
Yeah, I mean, F5 is going to build that, and then we'll contribute it, and then we'll see how collectively OPI can grow that into perhaps a bigger thing down the road. You know, we'd like to see it as a building block to work towards, as you say, an example or a tutorial maybe on showing more of a full solution and starting to touch on the problem of the out-of-box experience with DPUs, right? That the bar is just so high, it's really hard for people to engage with the DPU effectively. And if OPI can show people, hey, here's the tools, here's a workflow, here's a recipe. And I don't think we have that right now, but that's where F5 would like to go eventually. That's beyond the scope of our initial work, but I think that's what we're hoping to get to down the road.
Yeah, excellent. Dan, yeah, I was going to invoke you next, so perfect that you raised your hand. Dan?
I was going to say, I'm very supportive of both of these. And I think that we need to take it even farther. I think we need to think about how we as OPI would support these types of activities with a really high priority, even more higher priority than maybe our API development, right? Is that, you know, the way we've been doing the APIs thus far, they've sort of been a bridge to nowhere. You know, we build an API and, you know, if we build it, they will come type of thing. Well, these are real use cases that people have and that they want to be able to run on multiple devices. And so maybe we need to think about, you know, what's our procedure for someone brings a use case, they're bringing code, that code doesn't necessarily become part of OPI necessarily, but it needs to be served by OPI. So how do we you know, serve them as best we can, because these essentially they're our customer now. You know, we want to be able to have, you know, use cases like this run on an OPI platform. So I think that it's more meta than just, oh, do we let them post their code somewhere in OPI? I think it's more about how do we encourage this, and when they do land, how do we know that you know they do the demo for one DPU and then they do another demo on one IPU, and you know there's differences, but you know have we really solve the problem that we've been chasing after.
Right. KYS?
Yeah, I completely agree with Dan. And I think I want to extend what Dan said, right? Which is, and I can only speak for Microsoft. We do have some thoughts on what we want to do here, and there are projects underway within Microsoft to do just that. And so engaging with potential consumers early on and understanding what has been done and what direction these companies might be taking could inform us in terms of where we might find some convergence, if you will, across these approaches. As Dan said, right, we can come up with an API set and hope people will come to us, and hope that happens. But it's best we engage early on and try to see how much of existing investments could be absorbed in the abstractions that we want to come up with. Because this is not really truly a green field, right? I mean, things are happening, although in a very disjoint and chaotic way, things are happening.
Yeah, and we're trying to make the world of DPUs, and again, when I say DPU, whatever term you want to use for your device is all fine with me. I just need an umbrella term, so I'll always use the umbrella term. So what we're trying to do is make the world of DPUs a little less chaotic.
Exactly.
That's. I mean, if we make it the world a little more aligned and a little less chaotic, then that's level 1 victory. And we're looking. We want to go deeper into the playoffs with it, but that's our first round victory, which we have to aim for first. So I agree with you guys. I think the people bringing projects and code in that use our own internal APIs and our other components is valuable. I think bringing the components and looking at the APIs just as APIs, sort of a bottoms up approach, is also useful. But I think without the top down, hey, here's a problem that needs solving across multiple DPUs in the same way. And oh, here's how you do it. And look, here's how it uses all the APIs underneath. That's, to me, a really valuable, powerful result that we could get. So Dan and then Venkat.
Yeah, so I was just going to second that. And my question is, do we need to, as part of the TSC, put together, I hope it's not another work group, but maybe do we need to give direction to say, this is what we want? We want to be able to, we essentially want to have some maybe procedure or best known method to a reporting guide maybe for application developers to say, this is how you bring your application to OPI, and this is how these are the things you need to keep in mind to make sure that it can work with multiple vendors. Is that what we should be sort of giving direction for?
Yeah, that's certainly an approach we could take. I mean, again, if anyone else has feedback on that or wants to, agree or disagree with Dan, but Dan, that's certainly an approach we could take. And since you guys are proposing the Kate's networking use case, you could use that as an example of how that occurs. You could say, use that as the prototype, if you will, for that, or the Nginx one, right? Use that as the prototype. Either one or both could be used to develop what you're saying. Venkat?
So I heard the best definition in all these discussions from Vipin a while back about how we look at this as, sorry to put words in his mouth or signing him up for this, but I thought he really had a great definition where he was looking at it as multiple levels of platforms, for a lack of better word. So at the lowest level, there are certain objects, object level, work we need to do. What it means is you have a disk remotely, and then you make it available as a certain number of, virtual storage to the host, right? So you're kind of building those building blocks. Same thing for networking. You have a physical interface, you exposed virtual interfaces of certain capacity that you can configure, things like that. And then the next level, he was, again, I subscribe to this also, is that, you know, there is a config level, there is an application development level, there is a application deployment, right? So when we talk about Kubernetes, there are already a couple of these layers below. And that's where I agree with Dan and KYS that, you know, we need to do bottom up as well as top down. But we may benefit if we go back, and I'll also look up my notes so that we can remind Vipin of what it is. I think the way we could converge on the networking discussions or API would be to ask him to come back and maybe present that. To me, that's kind of puts all these different ideas that we have together in a coherent way.
Yeah, I think tossing the combination of what Dan was just talking about, KYS was just talking about, you were talking about, into a markdown file that's not a full like policy document and all that, but just, you know, here's how we think about application use of OPI and application integration. I think writing that down would be excellent, right? And if, you know, Vipin has this idea about layers, I think it would be an excellent exercise to sort of get everyone, make sure everyone's oriented the same way.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe that's a very high priority. It's just my suggestion because some of the discussions have reached a conclusion. I mean, a point, or otherwise we may be looping a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. We'll come back to the same discussion again and again. Do you want to ask Vipin to start, and then you know, you, KYS, and Dan can all fill in? And so the other thing I want to say is, you know, you don't have to be a paying member to be a full participant from the point of view of providing input, doing work, providing code. It's just a question of your voting rights and a few other things. Is you know, obviously we want to encourage people to join formally at one of the levels, but you know, nobody gets excluded just because they didn't pay the fee. This is you know, it's like the free to play model for games. Yeah, you know, you get a better experience if you put some money into it, but no one's going to exclude you if you don't. So just, you know, this is a good thing. So I'm glad that foundation works that way.
I think that, you know, maybe we should take these two examples. I think the third example that we had talked about a while back, but sort of got dropped, was OVN. You know, that's sort of in the networking space. That's like a ready-made open source community that we could integrate. So if we took those three examples and brought it back to the because all three of these examples are networking related. We took that back and said and brought it back to the OPI API working group. So instead of going to Vipin, I feel bad, you know, giving him ARs. But if we said, hey, we know of these two use cases, they've been presented. We know about OVN. You know, what is the process for, you know, either an open source community like OVN or just a set of motivated application, you know, contributors? What's the intake for them, or what's the uptake path for them to adopt OPI? And you know, what's the procedure for that? And I do think that falls pretty heavily on the API working group. So I think if we push that into that group, then we can just pick it up from there and think about all the different touch points that an application would have, and hopefully turn those into APIs.
Good point. Okay. And then Dan, maybe you could also summarize where we left the K8's networking use case discussion, because remember in the meetings, I guess last week, we were having there was a fair bit of back and forth on the proposal from Ericsson and Intel. Maybe summarize what the point and counterpoint for those were, since you were central to that discussion.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say the first order bit on all of this is that in the OPI API forums for the last 3-4 weeks, we've been discussing about Kubernetes network offload, and that Kubernetes network offload is for the primary Kubernetes network, while the Ericsson and Intel proposal is doing offloads on the secondary network. And so from that perspective, they both use Kubernetes, but the offload that you put into your DPU or IPU is pretty different. So so they probably should be thought of as two use cases. I was, hoping that we'd find some way to discuss them so it's a little bit easier. I think that the Intel Ericsson slides, we tried to move away a little bit from calling it the Kubernetes use case, because it sort of is different from the Kubernetes use case that we've been discussing in the work group. So there
was some counterpoint discussion. Can you summarize the counterpoint discussion as well?
Well, we essentially in the API work group, we just left it at that. It's like, okay, well, the Intel Ericsson proposal is for the secondary network, so we'll have to pick that up once we see the code and once we're ready to discuss that new use case. Okay,
that's fair. All right. Any other comments or thoughts on this topic? I mean, I think so. My direction is to embrace these. The code can go either in the POC repository, or if it's a bigger, more independent thing, it can migrate, as Stephen said, to its own repository. I'm okay with either approach, and that this is a good way for us to understand how OPI should really get used. And this is in combination with kind of what I'll call the discrete tools, like Secure ZTP or OTel. So those are kind of discrete. Tool is the wrong word. Components. Those are discrete components that do some lifecycle provisioning. But that's what I recommend, is that we go forward. Does anybody disagree?
So the only question is, what is being proposed, at least for the Ericsson Intel, to be pushed in? Because I mean, they're not today. I mean, they're not calling anything OPI today. They were just running some code on a DPU. So is it trying to? I mean, the goal is to try to figure out where those APIs live. But is there? What is it? Are we pushing what they've got so far in, even though it's not using or has any OPI in it?
Dan?
That's why I was saying we need an intake process. Like, right. I don't think that 95% of the code in that demo is not going to be in OPI. I agree. It's a consumer of OPI, and I think we're literally coming to OPI saying, "Hey, this is our use case. How can OPI support it so that we have that good abstraction underneath it?"
So what's OPI? So I guess what I would ask for that one, to Billy's point, is what is OPI missing to do better integration to make that code more portable across DPUs? Because that'll tell us what OPI needs to do.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Do additionally. So can we get that from you guys, Dan? Stephen has his hand up. Go ahead.
So, I mean, the way we should work this like any open source community, is we would want an open source use case that they could then build upon, right? So we would need something that can be self-contained that we can implement and test inside of our community without depending on their, I don't know if you would call it proprietary, but not something that's part of OPI, right?
Well, if there were hooks and, for lack of a better term, bridges from external to OPI, and we said, here's how you do integration with a proprietary or a third-party app using OPI, that seems to me to be useful as well. Yes, Stephen? Or what am I missing? I feel like I'm missing something.
That's certainly one way to do it. What I'm trying to get at is we, OPI, are going to struggle with, let's call it best case scenario. We get a bunch of companies who want to implement their products on top of OPI. We're not going to become their free service for developing an interface. Right? We need some open source way of developing, testing, and showing value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and now, I mean, with APIs, of course, we're in the world where we are defining an interface to DPUs, and the point is to be multi-vendor, correct?
Yep.
And so in a sense, we are, I wouldn't say we're a job shop, but we are bound to provide, our whole mission is to provide common APIs and common components and services, right?
Yes, but it's not like, let's say, you've got a company out there that wants to come in and build their application, their service. Our job is not to, take a requirement specification from them, implement it, and give it to them.
Okay.
Right? We need to be able to have some sort of self-contained application that we can include as part of our test suite.
Right. Well, so again, with the F5 proposal for Nginx, I believe we get the equivalent of that, right?
Absolutely. 100% agree.
Yeah. And the K8's networking proposal from Ericsson and Intel, I guess the points you make are good ones to track as we go through that one to see what the implications are.
Yes.
You make good points. Okay. Yeah, that's good discussion. Anyone else? All right. And then the boot one, we've only got 3 minutes. The boot one was, so yeah, I don't know if I want to get into the full discussion of this, but there are a bunch of different aspects of boot and a bunch of different configurations to handle. And the lifecycle and provisioning group was looking at doing one of them, but there are a couple of more that you could do either, in principle, even in parallel, but that might diffuse the effort. That was kind of why I wanted to bring this up here. maybe I'll put that as the agenda item next time after we get the working group updates. We'll take on the boot thing with the last 15 minutes. And try to set some direction on whether to go, try to handle all of the things at once. I mean, Dan, you were in the middle of that discussion. Any, 1 minute summaries you want to give?
Yeah, if I can get off mute. Yeah, it's just that, there's a couple different approaches. And I think that several of the OEMs were describing sort of issues that prop up because of DPUs and IPUs. So I think just the question was, do we go deep into like a full solution, or do we go and figure out standard ways to solve some of the issues around, hey, these devices need more cooling, they need more power, they are booting an operating system. I think that was the where we had left that discussion is, do we need to go and I think we came up with 2 or 3 different ways to do this thing. Do we go and flesh out all of them, or is there a better approach?
Right. All right. Any other final thoughts on that? Tim?
Yeah, and this wasn't really discussed in the working group, but I do think the TSC should maybe give some guidance that there's sort of this group of problems around the boot sequencing and how BMCs relate to each other and things we do over the PCIe bus that are going to touch on how the silicon has been implemented. And maybe 2 DPUs can do it this way, but this other way that's inferior, they can all do it. So even though we maybe come up with solutions for the current crop of DPUs, we should also think about making recommendations to the silicon vendors to say, hey, on your next gen, aspirationally, we'd like to do it this way. And if you guys could all get there, eventually we'd all be in a better place.
Yeah, and so that would be a standard, essentially defining almost not a hardware standard, but more of a host interaction standard, and put some requirements down. And again, if we can get all the DPU manufacturers to contribute and agree to that, it would be excellent, right? I mean, we have this in so many other areas that we work in, right? We have it for CPUs, we have it for memory, we have it for disks, we have it for printers. It's everywhere that this is what people do, right? The first generations are all over the place, and everyone gets together and go, okay, how should we really build? How should we? And then everyone agrees, and then you have a much easier path to integration and support inside of servers or other chassis. So I agree. Okay. Thank you, everyone. That'll conclude this call. I'll send a note to all the working group chairs to give a 10-minute summary next time. Thank you.
Thank you.